Apple keynote events are known to be catchy and highly informative. More importantly, they bring about very large audiences and viewers from all around the world. This is obviously very important to Apple because these events are the core and the starting point of maximizing developer and customer reach. Each year, Apple delivers a number of keynote events, one of which is the Worldwide Developers Conference, or the WWDC. This is an event that gives Apple the opportunity to announce a bunch of software-related updates and new features across its different operating systems like iOS, macOS, watchOS, and tvOS. As well as this, Apple delivers other events during which it announces new devices like iPhone, Mac, and Apple Watch. In recent years, specifically in 2020, there has been a significant change in how Apple delivers these events. We have seen a transition from a format involving a live keynote event held at a physical venue in front of a large audience to a format where a pre-recorded video keynote is live streamed to Apple's audience. But is one of the formats decisively better than the other? The answer to this question may vary depending on the person, which is why I won't get into whether one is definitely better than the other. Instead, I'll leave it to you to decide this. What I will do though is, through this video, I will offer my thoughts on what each format does well and doesn't do so well. Let's start with the classic format. What did it do well? For the most part, the answer lies within the vibe or the social aspect. Because this format ran for so long, Apple was able to emphasize the social aspect of its keynote events, allowing it to maintain the strong bond that it has with its customer base. This entailed getting live positive reactions from its audiences to its major announcements and milestones, as well as capitalizing on the cool factor, which is a side benefit of a live in-person keynote event. Of course, it's easy to understand why Apple excels at this, especially when it's considered to be one of the best companies when it comes to marketing. There are plenty of examples of this. Let's start with a very popular one, which is when Steve Jobs announced the first iPhone back in 2007. I'm sure a lot of you might have watched the event, and some of you may have even been privileged to physically attend it at the time. This was a legendary keynote event, with plenty of enthusiastic reactions from the audience, especially to the first iPhone's announcement. You can even find a 10-minute snippet of the keynote on YouTube with over 40 million views, and that's not even from an official Apple channel. Other examples include the release of the iPhone 5S, which introduced Touch ID back in 2013, the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in 2014, which featured larger displays, and the iPhone 10 in 2017, which was a significant all-round advancement at the time compared to iPhones that came before it. What these events had in common is that they inherently promoted the social element, and that was therefore possibly their biggest strength. While the classic format was big on the social aspect, including the hype and cool factor, it wasn't exactly flawless. Traditional Apple keynote events suffered from a risk which, while it was rather low considering the number of times the worst happened relative to the total number of keynotes, this risk did actually materialize into tangible problems. The issue is that when problems occur during a live in-person event in front of a massive audience, hiding them is pretty much impossible. Now you're probably wondering, what am I talking about? I'm talking about technical difficulties that Apple faced during some of its keynotes under the classic format. Let's go back to the 2007 keynote during which the original iPhone was announced. To the audience, everything looked like it was going smoothly, but in reality they weren't. The original iPhone prototype that Steve Jobs was using in his demo was not fully functional. In fact, the iPhone team had to determine specific tasks and a unique sequence for performing those tasks live to make it look like the iPhone was working flawlessly, something they refer to as the golden path. Any changes to the tasks or their sequence would have significantly increased the risk of the demo failing. Unfortunately for Apple, this wasn't something that they were able to hide during the WWDC 2010, when Steve Jobs was presenting the internet capabilities of the iPhone 4 compared to its predecessor. He had to quickly move on and shift everyone's focus from that to the difference in display quality, given the iPhone 4 was the first with a Retina display. But perhaps the worst fail in my opinion is that of Face ID, which was introduced as part of the iPhone X's capabilities. The intention of Face ID was to provide greater security to the iPhone, and while the feature did of course fulfill its purpose at a high standard, I'm sure Craig Federighi would have hoped that it did so from the first try when he was demonstrating it live on stage. But why are those examples a problem, especially if the devices and their features end up working as intended later when they're actually sold? The reason is that Apple sets very high standards and has extremely high attention to detail, to the point where their events are planned such that they can make sure everything runs completely smoothly. But when they encounter these kinds of challenges, which are bound to happen every now and then, things get messed up for them, and Apple would definitely want to avoid any customer backlash that can potentially happen because of those challenges. Let's move on to the new format. What does the new format do better than the old format? At the start of this video, I mentioned that the new format is basically a pre-recorded video keynote that is live streamed to Apple's audience. This leads to a very logical inference, which is that one of the key advantages of the new format is the fact that Apple is able to eliminate any technical errors that it would otherwise have encountered during keynotes under the classic format. Because keynotes under the new format are pre-recorded, Apple can easily resolve any issues that arise at any point during the recording process, and neither you nor I would ever hear about those issues. Remember how I said that the old format sometimes prevented Apple from delivering completely smooth keynotes because of the occasional technical difficulties? Well, the new format completely fixes that, allowing Apple to achieve this vision. Another positive aspect about the new format is that keynotes are now more elegant as well as visually and aesthetically pleasing. So under the old format, we got used to having an audience being present at a large venue, sitting and facing a large screen, where the visual elements of the keynote are displayed. There wasn't really much fancy about it, it's just a venue at the end of the day. But take a look at what we get to see now in the more recent keynotes. We get to see Apple buildings and facilities, as well as some beautiful structures and landscapes. All of this gives the audience a much nicer viewing experience. Of course, from Apple's perspective, these sorts of keynotes are flawless. They achieve the main goal of delivering important Apple product news, while also providing an enjoyable, high-quality viewing experience for the audience. But are they really flawless? The answer is maybe not. In fact, keynotes under the new format lack two elements that some would argue are what helped shape our perception of Apple keynotes in the first place. The first one, obviously, is the lack of a social aspect. Because the keynote is no longer delivered live and in person in front of an actual audience, the social aspect is basically non-existent. It's basically the same as watching any pretty well-edited YouTube video now. We no longer have the suspense that we once had or the wonderful audience reactions to every major announcement Apple makes. The second one has to do with the absence of charisma. The old format allowed for situations where it was possible to joke around and be playful with the audience, with the goal of entertaining them and eliciting a cheer or laugh out of them. Some of you might think I'm hinting at Steve Jobs specifically, but that's not actually the case. This isn't a Steve Jobs and co versus Tim Cook and co on presentation skills. In fact, both Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, as well as their respective teams that were directly involved in delivering keynotes under the old format, all deserve a lot of praise for making those keynotes as captivating and as memorable as they were. The point isn't to criticize Apple keynotes under the current format for their informational aspect. Both the classic and the current format have done a really good job in that regard, as they were both very informative. However, you may notice that the current format is much more structured and linear, with little room, if any, for favorable deviations that were more common under the old format. The charisma that made older Apple keynotes captivating seems to be fading away nowadays. But what do you think about this? Do you think that one format has a decisive edge over the other? I'm very curious to hear everyone's thoughts, so feel free to let me know in the comments. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like, share and subscribe. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments if there is anything tech you're interested in and want me to make a video about. Make sure to also tune in to the next video, which will cover the top 5 budget-friendly laptops for the end of 2024. Also, please consider supporting me by donating to my channel through buymeacoffee.com. I would really appreciate any support as I continue to bring fun and interesting content like this, only if you can, of course. Link is in the description. This was the Wizard of Tech, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.